Chapter 1. Exile in the Dead of Winter. The northern blizzard roared furiously outside the stone fortress of the Silvermoon Pack. A biting frost howled through the cracks of the thick oak doors, blowing freezing air into the gloomy interior. In the center of the vast and dim great hall, torches hanging on the stone walls flickered, casting light on the cold, hateful faces of the pack members. Elara knelt on the hard, freezing stone floor, her knees numb from the cold. Her wrists were bound tightly by rough, rusted iron chains. Her tangled hair obscured her pale face. She trembled from the cold, and from the sheer injustice weighing heavily on her shoulders. High above, Selene wore a soft fur coat. A smug look was plastered across her face, her eyes looking down at Elara with pure contempt. Beside her, the alpha of the Silvermoon Pack stood tall, his angry gaze glaring at the poor girl below. "Elara, do you plead guilty to your crimes?" His voice rang out coldly. Elara lifted her head. Her eyes remained clear yet filled with resolve. "I have never betrayed the Silvermoon Pack. I have never touched any of the Pack's secret defense documents to sell to the enemy. All of these accusations are entirely framed and fabricated by Selene." "Shut your mouth," Selene cut her off. "I saw her sneaking into your chambers with my own eyes that night. A useless, wolfless weakling like her wants to destroy the Pack for revenge." Whispers erupted across the great hall. The wolf warriors glared at Elara with disdain. In the Silvermoon Pack, strength was everything. A wolfless outcast like her who could not awaken her wolf was already a burden. Now the crime of treason made her even more despised. Not a single person stood up to defend her. Alpha Donald raised his hand to signal for silence. He decreed coldly, "A wolfless weakling has no right to defend themselves. According to Pack law, you will be branded as a criminal on your neck and exiled forever into the northern snowy forests." The moment he finished speaking, two warriors stepped forward and pinned Elara to the stone floor. She struggled with all her might, but it was futile. The executioner stepped out, holding a long iron rod with a red-hot branding iron at its tip. The shape of the mark was a broken blade, the symbol of an outcast. Searing heat radiated from it. "No. Please believe me," Elara screamed in despair. The executioner did not hesitate at all. He pressed the glowing hot iron hard against the skin on the left side of Elara's neck. A painful sizzle rang out. White smoke rose, carrying the scorched stench of burning flesh. An agonizing pain suddenly struck, like a fire burning directly into the very depths of her bones. Elara choked, her chest tightening. Her eyes widened in shock. Dark veins bulged across her forehead and neck. She clenched her teeth tightly to avoid letting out a weak whimper in front of Selene. However, the pain was far beyond her threshold of endurance. Elara's body convulsed violently, her vision blurred. She collapsed completely onto the stone floor, her entire body drenched in cold sweat, despite the freezing temperature of the hall. Selene stood high above, looking down, her lips curled slightly into a cruel and satisfied smirk. Her plan had succeeded flawlessly. When the iron rod was lifted, a raw, burning scar in the shape of a broken blade appeared on Elara's neck. This criminal brand would remain forever indelible. It was a life sentence declaring her an outcast, forever exiled from the Pack. Two guards dragged Elara along the fortress corridor. They roughly threw open the massive iron gates of the Silvermoon Pack. The freezing blizzard rushed in like a ravenous monster. They shoved her violently out into the freezing void. Elara tumbled into the thick blanket of snow. The gates behind her slammed shut with a heavy, hollow thud. The iron chains on her wrists had been removed, but this freedom was, in truth, nothing more than a death sentence in the harsh winter. The northern blizzard roared fiercely. The sharp snowflakes cut into her skin. Elara curled into herself. She wore only a thin dress of coarse burlap, utterly insufficient to withstand the sub-zero temperatures. Her feet sank into the cold snow, gradually losing all sensation. Each step she took grew increasingly heavy. She did not know where she was heading, surrounded only by a vast expanse of white snow and barren pine trees. She walked alone in the howling blizzard, her entire body shivering uncontrollably as her freezing breath crystallized in the air. The cold began to consume her body. Elara's consciousness gradually faded. A deadly drowsiness crept over her, growing stronger by the moment. She knew that if she collapsed now, the snow would bury her forever. In her delirium, her mind was suddenly pulled back to a bloody night 3 years ago. It was a stormy, tempestuous night. She gave birth to twins in a damp, rotting wooden cabin at the edge of the forest. The labor pains had felt as if they would claim her life. But the arrival of the two tiny angels warmed her heart. However, before that happiness could last, tragedy struck. The cabin door was shattered open, a dark shadow stepped inside. The figure used dark magic to seal her body. Elara could not move, could not scream for help. She could only watch helplessly as the assailant ruthlessly ripped the newborn twins from her arms. The last memory she saw before passing out was a tiny crescent moon scar on the shoulder of each infant. When she awoke, all memories of their father and her children's whereabouts had been erased. Only their heart-wrenching cries had echoed in her mind for the past 3 years. "Mother," a faint child's cry suddenly sounded amidst the howling wind in her ears. Elara snapped awake. She collapsed onto the snow. The wind still blew fiercely. There was no one around her. It was merely a hallucination from her exhaustion, but that phantom cry acted like a fire igniting inside her heart. It awakened her strongest maternal instincts. She must not die here. She had to live to find her 2 poor children. Clenching her teeth, she dug her frozen fingers deep into the cold snow to push herself up and keep moving forward. Elara dragged herself to the massive black stone gate of the fortress. The gate was guarded by the black guards clad in cold iron armor. The guard recognized the broken blade criminal brand on her neck and sneered in disdain. Gasping for air, she pleaded to work as a cleaning slave in the subterranean kitchen in exchange for her life. The guard roughly grabbed her by her hair, dragged her across the fortress courtyard, and threw her down the dark sloping passage leading deep into the subterranean kitchen. The place was extremely damp, filled with ash and rancid animal fat. The slaves worked tirelessly under the overseer's leather whip. Elara collapsed, but a glint of hope still shone in her eyes. Suddenly, from the upper floors, the deep, powerful howl of Lycan King Kaelin echoed through the halls, causing the ground to tremble slightly. The invisible bond in her chest stirred gently. Her journey had only just begun. Chapter 2. The beasts roar. The winter wind howled through the narrow stone crevices of the Lycan fortress. It stood towering amidst the snowy slopes of the north like a colossal black stone grave. There were no warm, flickering bonfires. There was no laughter or chatter of a normal pack. All that existed was cold isolation and an atmosphere thick with the stench of death. In the damp underground kitchen, the darkness reeked of moldy potatoes and green moss clinging to the stone walls. Freezing water seeped and spilled across the gray stone floor. Elara knelt hunched over on the slippery floor. Her hands were red and bloodied from scrubbing the rough iron pans of the blackguard soldiers. The cold water cut into her flesh like a sharp blade. Every scrubbing motion caused the wound on her neck to throb with searing pain. It was a glowing crescent-shaped brand of a criminal. A brand seared into her skin to punish her for a treason she did not commit. The Silvermoon Pack had rejected her. Her own father turned his back. Her half-sister Selene had stolen everything to ascend the stone throne of this fortress. They turned her into a weak Omega, a weakling humiliated in the lowest of places. But Elara did not cry. Her tears had already frozen on the night of her exile. She gritted her teeth to prevent any whimpers from escaping. She had to live. Deep within her empty mind, an invisible instinct screamed at her that she must absolutely not fall in this dark place. She must survive to reclaim the fragments of her stolen memories. She had to live for the 2 tiny lives that often appeared in her bloody dreams. Suddenly, the stone floor beneath her knees trembled. A horrific sound echoed down from above, piercing through the thick stone layers of the fortress. A furious roar tore through the freezing night. That was no ordinary wolf howl under the moon. It was the cry of a beast torn apart from the inside, wild, savage, and filled with wrath. The roar echoed down from the Black Tower, the residence of Lycan King Kaelin. The oppressive alpha aura swept down into the underground kitchen like a devastating blizzard. The Omegas in the underground kitchen instantly dropped their things. The sound of wooden buckets clattering against the stone floor echoed, and then went silent. They held each other, trembling and kneeling in submission. A few who could not withstand the pressure collapsed on the spot. The rest choked for air, black veins bulging on their pale faces. They pressed their faces against the damp stone, submitting to the king's wrath. He has gone mad again. An old maid huddled in a dark corner, her wrinkled hands trembling as she clutched her chest. The blood curse has flared up again. Elara froze. She raised her ash-colored eyes to look up at the stone ceiling. The mournful roaring continued to echo, creating a ringing vibration in her ears. Lycan King Kaelin, the old maid whispered in terror, the most powerful king of the werewolf realm, yet the most brutally cursed. When the curse flares up, he loses his mind, becoming a bloodthirsty monster. No one dares to approach the Black Tower at this time. Even the most elite Blackguard warrior could be torn to shreds if they dare cross the threshold. A second roar sounded, carrying the harsh clanking of giant silver chains being pulled taut. The chains binding the beast were stretched to their absolute limit. The pressure of the Supreme Alpha Authority weighed heavily on every lowly creature in the fortress. Unlike the terror of the surrounding maids, Elara did not kneel. Her chest suddenly throbbed with a sharp, intense pain. It was not the fear of cowering before the Alpha strength. It was a sharp, dull ache, as if a red-hot blade was thrust deep into her heart. Within her left chest, the sealed mate bond suddenly cracked, surging with a violent reaction. It vibrated with each powerful beat, resonating with the mournful roar atop the Black Tower. She heard in the Lycan King's savage roar not just bloodlust. Behind that sweeping rage lay absolute loneliness, a hopeless cry for help from the dark abyss of a captive soul. Why could she feel that? A weak Omega maid of lowly status, yet she dared to empathize with the Supreme Lycan King. Elara's head suddenly throbbed with a splitting headache. Dark fragments of memories rushed wildly into her empty mind. A pine forest blanketed in pure white snow, a man covered in blood kneeling under the moon, the rich scent of pine forest mingled with the warm smell of fresh blood in the freezing wind. A giant wolf with fiery amber eyes looked at her in despair. Ah, Elara whimpered softly, her fingernails clawing into her scalp. Her breathing grew rapid, black veins standing out along her neck and thin arms. She braced herself to endure the pain that threatened to explode her brain. But that image quickly vanished like a mirage. Her head returned to a terrifying empty void. Only the roaring grew quieter before fading away, leaving a heavy shroud of death hanging over the Lycan fortress. The next morning, the blizzard temporarily ceased, though the sky remained gray. The cold enveloped the Lycan fortress in a bleak gloom. The slave driver entered the underground kitchen, his pale face still showing traces of terror. He threw a wooden bucket and a few rolls of clean bandages down in front of Elara. "You piece of trash, Omega," he barked, his voice still trembling and unsteady. "Take these things to the royal wing in the East Wing and clean up the ruins immediately. The handmaids up there have all fled." The other maids immediately backed away from Elara. They looked at her with pity, relieved that they were not the ones called. Everyone understood that the East Wing was extremely dangerous right now. After the king's terrifying outbreak of the blood curse, the royal quarters had become a desolate ruin. Anyone who appeared could become a target for the beast's fury. Elara did not argue. She calmly picked up the wooden bucket and trudged away. Her bare, bloodied feet stepped onto the freezing spiral stone stairs. The higher she climbed, the more the air grew thick with the wild scent of blood and death. As she stepped into the East Wing corridor, Elara froze at the scene of chaos. What was once a luxurious royal quarters now resembled a desolate battlefield. Finely carved oak doors were smashed to splinters, scattered across the black marble floor. The sturdy stone walls were deeply gouged by the long claw marks of a giant beast. The velvet carpet woven with gold threads was shredded and stained with wet, fresh blood. A pungent metallic smell of blood mingled with the suffocating fear that hung over the hallway. At the end of the corridor, the Blackguard warriors stood on guard from a distance, their faces extremely tense. Their hands gripped the hilts of their silver swords, but none dared draw them. Pack law strictly forbade harming royal bloodlines, even if they were in a feral, frenzied state. "They've gone mad again, call for help," a warrior shouted. The little monsters tore the nanny's arm. A nanny shrieked as she fled for her life, blood gushing from a deep gash on her arm. From the room at the end of the hallway came a youthful, menacing growl. Elara stood frozen, the water bucket in her hand shook slightly. Her weak Omega instinct told her to run, but her heart pounded violently. An invisible thread of fate pulled her toward that room. She set the water bucket down. She slowly approached, placed her hand on the cold iron doorknob, and pushed the door open to step inside. Chapter 3. The royal twins hurried. Desperate footsteps pounded heavily against the cold marble corridors of the Lycan fortress. The fierce north wind howled violently outside the stained glass windows, carrying the bone-chilling cold of the wild northern wastes. Elara clutched a heavy basin of warm water and old worn bandages, her hands red and raw from the biting cold. Beneath her bare feet, the freezing stone floor cut sharply into her bleeding, unprotected heels. The painful sinner's brand on her neck still throbbed with a burning ache every single time she moved. But she did not dare to stop, not even for a single second. After the brutal rejection by the Silver Moon Pack and the ruthless torture inflicted by Selene, she understood that she had to endure everything just to survive. Suddenly, blood-curdling screams and the deafening sound of shattering objects echoed from the east wing. Elara startled in alarm. Two nannies fled in a frantic panic, their faces completely pale and drained of blood. Their clothes were ripped to shreds, drenched in streaks of fresh blood from deep claw marks scoring their arms. They collapsed heavily onto the floor, trembling uncontrollably like dry leaves swept up in a storm. The royal twins' feral instincts have erupted. One nanny shrieked hysterically through her tears. They have gone completely mad, and no one can get close to them right now. They will bite clean through anyone's throat. The Black Guard sentries raised their heavy silver shields, but their hands trembled violently, not daring to draw their swords. According to pack law, harming the royal bloodline was punishable by the immediate forfeit of one's life. They were caught in a desperate trap between self-defense and the severity of the law. "Go inform Lord Kalen," the captain bellowed. "It's completely useless. The Lycan King is still locked in chains within the Black Tower after last night's feral episode." One guard cried out in utter despair. From inside the room, youthful growls laced with a terrifying bloodlust echoed. It was not the sound of ordinary children crying, but rather the desperate snarls of wild beasts driven into a corner. The oppressive bloodlust in the air made the temperature along the corridor plummet to freezing levels. Elara froze in her tracks. The water basin in her hands trembled slightly. Her survival instinct urgently screamed at her to turn back and flee. Yet a strange, inexplicable sensation suddenly surged deep within her chest. A sharp pain flared up within her, as if someone were violently squeezing the air from her lungs. Amidst those savage growls, she could clearly hear the weeping of the two children torn apart by the agony of the curse. She could feel their profound isolation and their sheer, agonizing panic. The crescent-shaped scar on her shoulder suddenly burned hot as if branded by fire. Her maternal instinct arose with fierce power, completely overriding all logic and fear. "No, they are just children," Elara whispered. She set the basin of water down onto the stone floor and stepped steadily forward. Every guard was too busy retreating to save their own skin, paying absolutely no mind to her. "You worthless maid, are you completely insane?" The Black Guard captain roared, reaching out to pull her back. "Stepping in there is suicide. They will tear you to bloody pieces." Elara did not stop ignoring him. The surrounding world blurred, leaving only the rapid, frantic thudding of heartbeats coming from the inner room. She pushed open the claw-shredded wooden door and stepped inside. The entire room had been transformed into a ruined battlefield. The mattress was ripped completely apart, feathers drifting lazily through the air like falling snow. The torn red curtains lay strewn across the blood-spattered floor. The thick, metallic stench of fresh blood combined with cold sweat created a suffocating atmosphere. In a dark corner of the room, the two young children huddled closely together. They were barely 3 years old, yet their little bodies were rigid due to the effects of the blood curse. Dark black veins stood out clearly under their pale skin, a sign of the feral beast ravaging them from within. Their sharp claws protruded, dripping fresh blood from clawing desperately at the stone walls. Their eyes glowed with a soulless crimson light. They bared their tiny fangs and growled, shielding each other like wild beasts driven to the brink. Looking at those panicked, bloodshot eyes, Elara's heart shattered into pieces. Tears welled up, streaming down her gaunt cheeks and dripping onto the blood-stained floor. A crushing pain surged within her chest, completely suffocating her. Why did she feel such immense agony looking at them? She did not know, acting purely on the primal instinct of a mother watching her own children suffer. Elara knelt on the stone floor, completely ignoring the broken shards of wood that cut into her flesh and drew blood. She projected no threatening aura and assumed no defensive posture. "It's all right," she whispered softly, her voice as warm as a gentle spring breeze. "Mother is here now. No one will ever hurt you again." She slowly reached her scratched hand toward them, palm open and completely harmless. The twins froze, their low growls catching in their throats. Their small noses twitched, sniffing the air tentatively. Amidst the overwhelming scent of blood and fear, a faint, elusive fragrance drifted forward. It was a scent as pure as morning dew, as fresh and calming as magnolia under the moonlit sky. The little boy's eyes blinked slightly, his sharp claws slowly retracting. The little girl whimpered softly, and then they both timidly took a step toward her. Elara wrapped them tightly in her arms. As she touched their burning skin, a warm flow of energy awakened from deep within her own veins. Her ancient healer magic flowed instinctively through her fingertips. A soft silvery light, gentle as autumn moonlight, enveloped the royal twins. The dark black veins protruding on the children's skin slowly vanished. The crimson bloodlust in their eyes gave way to a clear, pure amber color. The twins nestled their heads into her chest, clinging tightly to her neck and whimpering softly. Their breathing gradually steadied, and they drifted into a peaceful sleep in her warm embrace. Elara held her children close through her tears, her heart filled with a suffocating, profound peace. Right at that moment, the heavy door was violently kicked open. A terrifying pressure swept in, making the air in the room feel as if it were completely sucked dry. Heavy, echoing footsteps pounded against the stone floor. Lycan King Kalen appeared. The king's tall, imposing figure blocked the doorway, completely obscuring the scarce light from the corridor. Kalen wore his royal cloak, stained black with dried blood and mud from the dangerous borders. His eyes glowed with the crimson fire of a feral beast, black veins bulging along his stubborn jawline from the blood curse, still tearing him apart from the inside. He had rushed here the moment he sensed his pups panic through their pack bond. The supreme alpha aura rolling off him was so powerful that the guards out in the corridor collapsed, clutching their throats and gasping for air. Kalen stepped in with his sharp claws extended, ready to tear apart anyone who dared to harm his pups. But the sight inside the room made the Lycan King freeze, his crimson eyes contracting in sheer shock. The two children, who had been extremely ferocious and ready to tear everything apart, were now sleeping peacefully in the embrace of a pale, ragged Omega Maid. A miraculous silence and peace enveloped the space that had just been filled with murderous intent. And above all, he caught the faint scent of magnolia, the pure fragrance that had haunted him for the past 3 years. It slipped into his lungs, instantly soothing the raging fire of the blood curse, and causing the savage wolf inside him to ease with relief. Kalen stood frozen in place, his fiery eyes locked onto the Omega girl who was looking up. A profound tremor erupted from the depths of his soul. The mate bond, their long-shrouded fated connection, suddenly vibrated violently. He looked at her blood-stained hands, then at the two children sleeping soundly, as if they had found their sole protector. A major question planted itself in the king's skeptical mind. Who was this lowborn girl, and why did she possess the magnolia scent capable of taming his savage blood? Kalen strode closer to her. His large claws reached out, tilting her chin up to force her to look directly into his turbulent eyes. Elara trembled but did not shy away, her spine remaining perfectly straight. The freezing night of the Lycan fortress seemed to stand still, witnessing the gears of their destiny begin to turn, marking the start of a volatile future. Chapter 4. The Lycan King's offer. The blizzard outside the Lycan fortress howled in wild bursts, slamming hard against the stained glass windows of the royal study. Inside the vast space built of rough black stone, the fire in the hearth flickered, yet it was completely unable to dispel the enveloping chill. Long shadows stretched across the floor, dancing to the rhythm of the dying embers. Elara stood, with her head bowed quietly in the center of the room, her fragile frame trembling violently under her thin, tattered servant clothes. Her bare feet were numb from contact with the freezing stone floor. But her greatest fear at this moment was not the cold, but the crushing pressure of authority weighing heavily on her shoulders. Kalen paced slowly around her, the heavy thud of his leather boots on the stone floor echoed in sharp, dry cracks like the footsteps of death. The towering, imposing figure of the Alpha King cast a pitch-black shadow over Elara, making her feel small and helpless like a withered leaf before a storm. "Did you think you could deceive me?" Kalen's voice was low and cold, carrying a purebred alpha aura that seemed to freeze the air in the room. Elara felt herself suffocating, her lungs burned from the lack of oxygen. The aura of a supreme Lycan was something a weak Omega like her could not withstand. She had to grit her teeth to stop her knees from buckling onto the floor. Kalen stopped abruptly right in front of her. He reached out with his large, calloused, rough hand brutally gripping her chin and forcing her face upward. A sharp, stinging pain shot straight to her brain. Elara was forced to look directly into his deep amber eyes. Those eyes glowed in the darkness, harboring the cruelty of a predator toying with a small prey. A kitchen maid? Kalen sneered, his laugh dripping with utter contempt. A weakling exiled by her former pack? He pressed his thumb hard against the delicate skin of her neck, stopping right at the branded crescent-shaped scar. It was the mark of betrayal that the Silver Moon pack had branded onto her. The irritation of the old wound made black veins bulge on Elara's neck, and she was in so much pain that she almost fainted. You bear this mark of betrayal, yet you roam freely in my fortress. Kalen snarled, his murderous intent flaring. What dark magic did you use to get close to my pups? Kalen brought his face close to her neck. The distance was so close that he could clearly feel her erratic pulse. At that moment, the Lycan King's sense of smell suddenly froze. Beneath the scent of dirt on her tattered shirt, a faint scent of magnolia drifted out. It was incredibly pure, that scent hit his chest like a hammer blow. The royal wolf inside him suddenly let out a low growl of relief. His blood, which had been boiling from the blood curse, grew strangely calm. This scent was identical to the night he was rescued 3 years ago. The destined scent of his mate. Kalen froze, staring intently at Elara's face. But how could that be? The one who saved him was Selene. Selene always wore a heavy scent of rose perfume that could never soothe him. Yet this girl was nothing but a low-class weakling Omega. Speak, who are you? Kalen tightened his grip on her chin, his sharp claws digging into her flesh and drawing blood. Where did you steal this scent from? Elara choked, her hands clutching the hem of her torn clothes. She felt as if her very soul was being crushed, even though her memory was empty, stolen by a dark magic seal. Her survival instinct did not allow her to kneel and beg. I am only Elara, she forced out each word. I do not use dark magic, nor did I steal anything. You lie, Kalen roared, the sound shaking the stone room. If you are just a weakling, why do the twins only listen to you? Why did your touch extinguish their frenzy? Elara paused. She did not know how to explain it. Her instincts had simply taken over when she saw them in pain. She could not explain why she wanted to protect them so desperately. As she held them, a primal maternal bond welled up within her, making her forget all her fear. Kane looked deep into her ash-gray eyes, sensing her sincerity. The wild wolf inside him suddenly quieted down. The blood curse tearing him apart also seemed to ease slightly in her presence. He had to make a decision, even if it was full of risks. From today, you are no longer a cleaning maid. Kalen turned his back, his voice commanding and firm. You will be the personal nanny of the twins. Elara stared at him with wide eyes, and before she could process this, Kalen stepped close to her once more. Kalen leaned down, his voice hissing through his teeth in a threatening whisper. But remember this well, if you dare to harm my pups, you will die. I will snap your neck with my own hands. I will make you pay with your life. The cold, murderous intent radiating from him enveloped her. Elara choked, but she still gritted her teeth and endured. She nodded. I understand. Just then, haughty footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. The door to the room swung open and Selene appeared. She wore a brilliant red silk dress, her face heavily made up, but when she saw Elara, her arrogance vanished completely. In its place was a look of sheer terror. Her eyes widened, and her face went as pale as a corpse's. How are you still alive? Selene gasped, trembling. Selene had thought Elara froze to death in the deep forest after being exiled. Seeing Elara standing near Kalen, her jealousy and fear flared up frantically. If Kalen realized that Elara was his true mate, and the one who had given birth to the twins, Selene would lose all her fake status and her future on the throne. She tried to regain her composure, forcing a charming smile and quickly stepping forward to clasp Kalen's arm. Kalen, why are you with this traitorous Omega? She was exiled for stealing and betraying the pack. Order the Black Guard to throw her out immediately. She will harm our pups. She used a sweet yet venomous tone to provoke Kalen, deliberately emphasizing Elara's filthy status to make him despise her. Kalen coldly pulled his arm away from Selene's grasp. There was not a trace of warmth in his eyes for her, only a terrifying indifference. I have appointed her as the personal nanny, Kalen said, his voice flat yet commanding. The pups only listened to her. Selene felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She shrieked in fury, No, Kalen, I am the one who saved you. I am your Luna. You cannot let this filthy weakling care for our pups. I demand that you throw her out. My mind is made up, Kalen dismissed coldly, his alpha aura suffocating Selene so that she dared not say another word. She bit her lip hard, threw Elara a hateful glare, and stormed off in anger. Kaelin turned back to look at Elara, his amber eyes filled with countless unresolved questions. The door to the room slammed shut, leaving the two of them in the silent darkness. Chapter 5. The Blackstone Keep. The north wind howled outside the gray stone walls of the Blackstone Keep. The bitter cold enveloped every corner. Inside the nursery, the fireplace was crackling. Orange embers chased away the gloomy darkness of the Black Tower. Elara knelt beside the bronze tub. She used a towel to wipe the water from the two children's bodies. The twins were unusually well-behaved today, no longer growling or scratching. The boy burrowed his head into her shoulder, while the girl clung tightly to the hem of her tattered, coarse tunic. Every touch from the pup sent a shiver through her heart. An invisible bond tightened around her soul. Elara did not understand why an exiled handmaiden like her felt this way toward the Lycan king's children. She gently poured water over the boy's shoulder. As the suds washed away, she froze, her eyes widened. On the boy's left shoulder, hidden beneath his milky white skin, was a faint birthmark. It bore the shape of a perfect crescent moon. The silver crescent birthmark stood out on his skin. Her chest tightened. Elara gasped, her heart pounding violently. Her head throbbed as if pierced by a silver needle. Memories of a nightmare flooded back, a blizzard night 3 years ago, in a dark cave. She screamed in agony during childbirth. The cries of 2 newborns were torn apart by Selene's cruel laughter. She, along with the soldiers, snatched the 2 babies from her arms. Elara struggled helplessly. A silver needle was driven into her left shoulder to seal her memory. Elara tremblingly pulled aside her stiff, coarse tunic and touched her own left shoulder. Beneath the scars, she felt a patch of raised skin in the exact same spot and of the exact same size. It was the exact same crescent birthmark as her son's. The dark magic seal on her mind began to crack. Black veins bulged along her neck. Elara collapsed onto the freezing stone floor. She breathed heavily, her hands gripping the tub tightly. The truth shattered wide open. These twins were the flesh and blood she had birthed. They were her biological children. Tears welled up and rolled down her cheeks. Elara pulled the 2 children tightly into her embrace. The twins whimpered softly, burrowing deep into her chest, seeking a familiar warmth. A wolf pup's instinct never lied. They had always known she was their mother. "I'm here. My babies," Elara sobbed. Rage surged within her. Selene had stolen everything. She had used dark magic to steal the identity of Kaelin's savior. She had forced her to live as a humiliated handmaiden right in this keep. Elara clenched her fists. She must not break. She had to protect her children from her claws. Meanwhile, in the dungeon deep beneath the keep, Selene stood before a stone table covered in jars of toxic herbs. The glow of black candles cast her shadow onto the damp stone walls. She was performing a dark witchcraft ritual. Selene dripped a few drops of blood into a bronze bowl filled with dried wolfsbane powder. She muttered the curse in an eerie whisper. Purple smoke billowed up, carrying a foul stench. This was how she had reinforced the spell on the Lycan king Kaelin for 3 years. This dark magic dulled Kaelin's sense of smell, making it impossible for him to recognize the sweet scent of his fated mate. It imprisoned his inner wolf in chaos, forcing him to believe that Selene was the one who had saved him on that night of blood years ago. But recently, Selene had felt uneasy. Kaelin was starting to suspect it. Elara's presence disturbed the magical connection. Kaelin's wolf fought back fiercely every time Selene drew near. She blew out the black candles, her eyes flashing with a venomous light. She had to banish Elara immediately. Selene stormed down the dark corridor leading to the nursery. The sharp click of her stiletto heels echoed sharply against the marble floor. The black guards standing watch outside bowed upon seeing her. Selene flung the oak door open. The door slammed against the wall with a loud bang. Elara was standing by the bed, carefully tucking in the 2 fast-asleep children. She turned her head. Her gaze was calm but cold, locking directly onto Selene's heavily made-up face. "Are you still here, you lowly weakling?" Selene hissed. She approached, radiating perfume that masked the scent of toxic herbs. Selene glanced at the sleeping twins, then glared at Elara with utter contempt. "Listen closely," Selene said, her voice dripping with threat. "I'm giving you one last chance. Pack your things and get the hell out of the Blackstone Keep tonight. Otherwise, I will make you disappear beneath the snow out there." Elara stood up straight. Her skin was still pale, and the corner of her lips still bore the scar from the lashing. But there was no fear left in her eyes. A mother's strength made her as unshakable as a stone wall. I am not going anywhere, Elara replied in a soft but firm voice. Selene burst into a loud, twisted laugh. Where do you get that confidence from? A powerless Omega exiled by the Silvermoon Pack. Do you think Kaelin will protect you? To him, you are nothing more than a maid. With just one word from me, he will snap your neck in accordance with pack law. Elara looked straight into Selene's eyes, her ash-gray eyes unblinking. Are you afraid, Selene? Elara asked softly. Her question was like a bucket of cold water poured over Selene's pride. Her face flushed red with anger. What did you say? You are afraid because the Lycan king hasn't touched you for 3 years, Elara continued, each word cutting deep into Selene's sore spot. You are afraid because the children detest your scent. You used witchcraft to deceive him, but lies cannot last forever. Shut your mouth, Selene snarled. She raised her hand to slap Elara. Sharp claws gleamed under the firelight, but this time Elara did not stand still to take the blow. She quickly reached up and caught Selene's wrist in midair. The grip from the slender hand was so strong that it made Selene grit her teeth in pain. Her boiling healer blood granted her superior natural strength. Let go, Selene shrieked, trying to pull her hand back but failing. Look closely at me, Elara growled, bringing her face close to Selene's. I am no longer the weak sister you can trample on however you want. If you dare touch me or my children again, I will expose your true face before the High Council myself. Elara's resilience and overwhelming aura made Selene tremble with fear. She realized the weakling of the past had changed, and the seal was slowly failing. Elara flung Selene's hand away with force. Selene stumbled back a few steps, nearly collapsing onto the freezing stone floor. She gasped in humiliation and fury. You will pay for this arrogance, Elara, Selene hissed through her teeth. The upcoming snowball will be your funeral. Selene immediately turned on her heel, stormed out, and slammed the wooden door shut. The noise made the 2 children stir slightly. Elara quickly turned around, patting their backs until they fell fast asleep again. She stood still, gazing out the window of the black tower. Snowflakes were still falling heavily outside. She knew all too well that the real battle had only just begun. Suddenly, the temperature in the nursery plummeted. A familiar, suffocating bloodlust enveloped the room. The heavy footsteps of Lycan King Kaelin echoed in the hallway, drawing closer and closer. The wolf inside him caught the scent of blood and the recent conflict. Elara's heart hammered frantically as his dark shadow began to stretch beneath the door. Chapter 6: The Blood Moon. The blood moon's crimson glow enveloped the summit of the black tower. A deep blood-red hue stained the dark gray clouds. The north wind shrieked through the stone crevices, carrying the howling blizzard raging outside the Lycan citadel. The blood moon rose. The blood curse in the veins of Lycan King Kaelin flared to its absolute peak. Deep within the darkest chamber at the top of the tower, a mournful roar ripped through the night. Kaelin was undergoing brutal torture, his rippling muscles tensed, black veins bulging web-like along his arms and up to his neck. Gritting his teeth, his elongated, razor-sharp claws shredded his own palms, leaving streaks of thick black blood dripping onto the stone floor. To protect his pack and the twins, Kaelin had chained himself. Massive silver chains, anchored deep into the black stone walls, pinned his wrists and ankles. The silver metal burned his flesh under the influence of the blood curse, releasing a pungent smoke. The bone-deep agony choked him, his chest heaving violently. He collapsed onto the cold stone floor, yet his beastly instincts still clawed frantically to unleash their destructive power. The wild beast inside was trying to swallow his last remaining shred of sanity. He would rather endure this ruthless torment than turn into a monster. In the outbuilding at the foot of the castle, Elara jolted awake. Her chest tightened with pain, as if an invisible hand were squeezing her heart. The sharp agony quickly spread through her veins. She gasped for air, cold sweat soaking her clothes. The mournful roar echoed down from the summit of the black tower, piercing through the thick stone walls. That sound carried the ultimate alpha aura, crushing the will of the other Omegas and sending them cowering into the dark corners. But to Elara it was the agonizing call of destiny. The invisible mate bond vibrated violently, urging her to action. She knew Kaelin was in danger. Elara stepped out of bed. Her bare feet touched the icy stone floor. She hurriedly threw on a threadbare woolen cloak and slipped out of the outbuilding. The citadel was shrouded in gloomy darkness, guided only by the crimson moonlight. She slipped through long corridors, blending into the shadows to evade the patrolling black guard. The path up to the Black Tower was heavily guarded. 2 black guard sentries stood watch before the iron door, their hands gripping silver weapons. Elara hid behind a stone pillar, holding her breath. The ancient healer magic within her stirred. She focused her mind, channeling a gentle stream of energy that drifted into the air like a thin mist, carrying a faint scent of magnolia. This soothing aroma eased the guards' nerves, suddenly making them drowsy, their eyelids growing heavy. Elara quickly slipped past them, pushed open the spiral stone door leading to the tower, and vanished into the darkness. She climbed the freezing spiral stairs. The roaring grew louder, slamming against her eardrums and carrying a dense aura of bloodlust. As she pushed open the heavy oak door of the dark chamber, the scene before her made her heart clench. Kalen was kneeling on the floor, his hair disheveled. He roared frantically, straining against the silver chains. The clanking of metal echoed harshly in the confined space. Gray smoke rose from his bloody wrists, his flesh scorched black. The Lycan King's amber eyes were now blood red, consumed by madness. Upon sensing the presence of another creature, Kalen snapped his head around. His bloodshot eyes locked onto her, baring his sharp fangs. He let out a deafening roar. His furious alpha aura surged, suffocating the surrounding air. "Get out," Kalen roared, his voice raspy and choked with pain. "I'll tear you apart, leave now." He clung to his fading sanity to drive the girl away. The wild beast within him shrieked relentlessly to tear and draw blood, but his proud soul fought back fiercely. He did not want this woman's blood on his hands. Elara looked deep into his agonized, blood-red eyes. She saw the absolute isolation and the ultimate internal conflict of a king. She did not flee. She took steady steps toward him, her gaze never wavering. "I am not leaving," she whispered. Her gentle voice pierced through his roars, carrying an uncanny warmth. "I am here to help you." Kalen let out a final roar and lunged forward, but the silver chains jerked him back. The violent recoil threw him off balance, and he collapsed. Elara did not hesitate. She immediately knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his broad, scorching shoulders. The moment their skin met, a fierce jolt of electricity sparked through both of their bodies. Kalen jolted and froze, the king's bare chest burned hot as fire, sweat soaking his shoulders. Beneath Elara's thin shirt, the warmth from her chest flowed directly into him. Their bodies pressed tight against each other, igniting a searing physical contact. Kalen sensed the scent of the true Luna, the pure rich fragrance of magnolia that overpowered the metallic stench of blood. The wild wolf inside him suddenly went quiet, submitting to this primal scent. But the blood curse did not retreat easily. It clawed frantically, resisting the purifying force. Elara shut her eyes, channeling every drop of the ancient healer magic in her veins. She began to share his pain. A bone-shattering agony surged from Kalen's body into Elara's. Black veins began to crawl up her arms. Elara gasped for air, blue veins bulging on her pale forehead. The torment felt as though it would crush every single one of her bones. She clenched her teeth, refusing to let a scream escape. She tightened her embrace, pressing her chest flush against his back. Kalen's hot breath fanned the crook of her neck as she channeled all her healing power to soothe the hellfire. A soft silver light began to emanate from Elara's fingertips, enveloping them both. Under the soothing influence of the healer blood, the black veins on Kalen slowly receded. His blood-red eyes gradually gave way to clear amber. His ragged breathing slowed. The blood curse was forced to shrink back, exhausted. Kalen rested his head on her shoulder, basking in the only peaceful warmth he had known. The moment their physical contact reached the peak of harmony, a massive wave of healing energy rebounded into Elara's mind. It collided violently with the dark magic seal placed by Selene. The seal cracked with a silent explosion. Shards of memories from 3 years ago rushed back into her mind all at once. On a snowy winter night, she had cut her own hand to save an injured black wolf. She had given birth to the royal twins in a freezing stone cave before Selene ruthlessly stole her pups and sealed her memories. Kalen was also deeply shaken as identical images flashed before him. He realized that this magnolia scent belonged to his savior. "Elara, it was you," Kalen rasped, holding her tight. Suddenly, urgent echoing footsteps clattered outside in the corridor. The thick iron doors of the Black Tower were slammed wide open. Selene appeared alongside the Black Guard, her eyes burning with murderous hatred at the scene before her. Chapter 7. The snowball a blizzard howled furiously outside the giant black stone walls of the Lycan fortress. Heavy snow fell, swallowing the cold, desolate hills of the north. Inside the vast great hall, the air was stiflingly hot and suffocating. Thousands of beeswax candles burned brightly on black iron stands. The flickering light reflected off the gray stone walls, casting eerie shadows. Noble silver silk ribbons intertwined with frost-covered pine branches. The grandest winter gala of the year was underway with intense liveliness. Selene had meticulously planned it all by herself for weeks. Her goal was to force the Lycan king Kaelin into an engagement. She wanted her Luna title officially recognized before the Lycan nobility. High Council members and powerful alphas were all present. They savored blood-red wine, laughing and discussing power. The scent of luxury perfume mingled with snow, creating a suffocating atmosphere. The contrast between the glamour inside and the cold outside was stark. Groups of lavishly dressed nobles clinked their glasses, toasting in a drunken revelry. They had absolutely no idea that a sinister conspiracy was about to begin. The villainous Selene stood amidst the crowd, smiling with arrogant self-confidence. Elara knelt on the freezing stone floor in a dark corner of the banquet hall. She wore a thin, tattered, coarse gray maid outfit. Her hands trembled as she wrung out a rag soaked with melted snow. Guests entering and exiting tracked in snow, dirtying the black stone floor. Her hands were blistered from the water and harsh detergents. The scar on her neck chafed against the rough collar, stinging painfully. But Elara's chest was smoldering with a completely different fire. The seal on her memories had completely shattered after last night. She remembered all the heartbreaking events that occurred 3 years ago. The crescent birthmark on the boy's shoulder was a hereditary trace. Those wild royal twins were the flesh and blood she had birthed. And the brutal Lycan king, Kaelin, was her fated mate. Hatred for Selene surged through her veins like burning lava. That wicked woman had used witchcraft to steal her biological children. However, Elara forced herself to bow her head and endure. She needed more time to gather evidence of the woman's dark magic. If she acted recklessly now, she would be executed before claiming her children. Her resilience and maternal love helped her rise above the humiliation. The violin music rose shrilly, stimulating the crowd's excitement. Arrogant Lycan nobles kept entering the main great hall. Among them was the Silvermoon pack, the former pack that had ruthlessly abandoned Elara. The alpha of her old pack led the group inside, looking extremely conceited. Suddenly, a she-wolf in the group stopped, pointing her finger and laughing out loud. "Look at that, isn't this our exiled weakling Omega?" Her mocking laughter immediately drew the attention of those around. The alpha stepped forward, looking down at Elara with absolute contempt. He lifted his leather boot, covered in snowy mud, and stomped hard on her mop rag. "You treacherous lowly wretch, this maid status suits you perfectly." "Trash only deserves to kneel at the feet of others," she chimed in. The crowd began to whisper and buzz, throwing contemptuous looks at her. They insulted her status as a banished criminal maid. Elara did not lift her head to confront them, keeping her spine rigid. She gripped the mop handle so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her fingernails dug deep into her palms to restrain her instincts. The healer blood within her reacted violently to the humiliation. She told herself to be patient. She was not allowed to cause trouble at this moment. At the center of the banquet hall, Selene stepped out, as gorgeous as a queen. She wore a crimson silk evening gown that hugged her curves. Her hair was adorned with a haughty, sparkling gemstone hairpin. The crowd quickly surrounded her, offering fake flattery. They all believed she was the great savior, who saved the Lycan king's life. The Luna seat beside the stone throne would surely belong to her tonight. Selene smiled brightly, but her eyes turned sharp upon seeing Elara. She could not tolerate the presence of the maid in the banquet hall. The closeness between Elara and the twins made her deeply anxious. She had to seize power before Kaelin discovered the truth. Holding a crystal wine glass, Selene walked toward Elara, who was cleaning. She pretended to be engrossed in conversation with a High Council elder. As she passed by, Selene intentionally tripped Elara hard. Elara lost her balance, collapsing onto the wet, freezing stone floor. The dark red wine in Selene's glass poured all over her. "Oh my goodness, what are you doing?" Selene shrieked in panic. She bent down, pretending to help Elara stand up immediately. But in that split second, she quickly slipped her hand into the apron pocket. She secretly slipped the royal amulet ring into her pocket. The ancient moonstone-encrusted Luna ring emitted a cold light. This royal relic was originally reserved solely for the official Luna. Selene recoiled backward, clutching her chest and crying out in despair. "My Luna ring, the royal amulet, has been stolen." Her piercing shriek instantly cut through the violin music. The entire great hall fell into a tense, deathly silence. Hundreds of noble eyes converged upon the two of them. High Council elders immediately approached with grim expressions. Blackguard warriors quickly secured and surrounded the exits. "I was just standing next to this maid when the ring vanished," she accused. Selene wept hysterically, dark veins bulging on her neck from her theatrical performance. "She stole it to ruin my engagement." The alpha of the Silver Moon pack stepped out of the crowd, chiming in loudly. "I confirm that this weakling Omega was once exiled for theft." He looked down at the kneeling Elara with eyes full of disdain. "Her wretched nature can never be changed." Angry whispers began to erupt throughout the grand hall. How disgusting, a maid daring to touch a royal relic. Brand her as a criminal again and hang her immediately. Elara suffocated under the weight of hundreds of harsh insults. Two blackguard warriors pinned her shoulders firmly to the stone floor. Yet there was no fear in her ash-colored eyes. She held her head high, staring straight into Selene's smug face. "Search her immediately," the High Council elder ordered. The guard shoved his hand roughly into her apron pocket. He pulled out a white gold ring that emitted a soft moonlight glow. The Luna ring was revealed before the horrified gaze of everyone. With the evidence clear, Selene smirked, preparing to order the execution. Chapter 8. The king's wrath. The air inside the great hall was so suffocating that it felt frozen solid. A blizzard roared outside the black stone fortress, relentlessly battering the towering glass windows. But the cold outside could not compare to the deathly chill enveloping the hall. Elara knelt on the freezing stone floor, her hands pinned down by heavy chains. The exile scar on her neck burned hot, throbbing with sharp pain. Her thin maid's tunic was not enough to shield her from the biting north wind. Her palms were still bleeding, staining a patch of the stone floor red. Around her, hundreds of Lycan nobles gathered in a closed circle. Their eyes held not a shred of pity for her. There was only coldness, contempt, and cruelty. "Execute her, enforce pack law." A loud shout rang out from the table of the High Council elders. "A filthy Omega weakling dares to steal a royal treasure." The elder of the Silver Fang pack slammed his hand on the table. He stood up abruptly, his wrinkled face contorted in malice. "She stole Lady Selene's moonstone ring. This is an insult to the royal family's honor." Selene stood by the table, her face stained with fake tears. She sobbed softly, her slender shoulders trembling like a petal in a storm. But deep within her blue eyes was a smug, venomous glare directed straight at Elara. "Kaelin, please demand justice for me," Selene choked out, looking toward the stone throne. "The ring is a keepsake from the night I saved you, proof of our bond. Yet this weak maid dared to steal it, hiding it under a pile of rags in the Black Tower. I cannot believe she would betray your mercy." The nobles' stirred whispers spread like venom. "A traitorous wretch, hang her." They shouted in unison, eager to crush a weak Omega's life to display their power. Elara knelt amidst the wreckage, her back still straight. She did not cry or defend herself, knowing any words would be meaningless against the High Council's prejudice. Her ash-gray eyes still burned with resilience, pinning her half-sister with a glare. She was waiting. On the black stone throne, Lycan King Kaelin sat silently in the shadows. His face was cold and motionless, like a statue carved from ice. His silver wolf fur royal cloak draped to the floor, concealing his massive, scarred frame. His amber eyes held no emotion, but deep within his pupils a red flame smoldered. Primal fury surged through his veins. His blood-footed curse stirred violently, demanding to tear the noisy instigators apart. But more than that, his instinct to protect, his mate roared frantically as he saw the fresh wounds on Elara's body. Kaelin stood. At the king's slightest movement, the entire great hall fell instantly silent. The room's temperature plummeted suddenly. A massive wave of alpha aura exploded, sweeping through the banquet hall. The High Council elders felt as if a boulder were crushing their chests, black veins bulging from suffocation. The weaker nobles collapsed to the floor in unison, submitting to the Lycan King's ultimate power. Kaelin stepped down the stone stairs. Each footfall echoed like rumbling thunder. His alpha power forced everyone present to submit. He looked at no one else, his gaze locking solely onto the trembling Selene. Selene felt the terrifying bloodlust aimed directly at her. The smile on her lips froze and her legs began to tremble uncontrollably. She had to take a step back, her hands gripping the edge of the table to avoid collapsing under Kaelin's sheer pressure. Kaelin stopped right in front of Selene. His towering height cast a dark shadow that completely devoured her figure. His silence was more terrifying than 10,000 threats. "Where is the ring?" Kaelin spoke. His voice was deep and raspy, yet terrifyingly clear, echoing through every corner of the great hall. Selene tremblingly held out her clenched fist. On her palm lay the moonstone ring, gleaming with a soft light. Here it is, my lord, that Maid hid it. Fortunately, I found it before she could smuggle it out of the fortress." "It is the royal ring." Kaelin reached out with his scarred fingers and picked up the ring. He narrowed his eyes, examining the gleaming jewelry under the dim light. A cold, cruel smile appeared on the king's lips. "The royal ring?" Kaelin growled, to the astonishment of the entire High Council and the nobles kneeling on the floor. Kaelin clenched his fist. The muscles in his arm rippled, crack, a sharp hiss echoed. The ring was instantly crushed to pieces under the terrifying force of the ultimate alpha. It turned into a foul, pitch-black smoke, emitting a stench of rotten, dried blood, shrieking eerily before dissolving into the air. Dark magic, witchcraft, this was no royal treasure. It was merely a fake created with dark magic to frame Elara. The entire hall erupted in terror. Several elders stared wide-eyed at the black smoke that had just vanished. Kaelin opened his palm, letting the black dust scatter onto the stone floor. He leaned down, bringing his face close to Selene's, his crimson gaze looking ready to incinerate her very soul. "Do you take me for a fool, Selene?" Kaelin hissed through his teeth. "You used this filthy dark magic to frame her right inside my fortress. Do you think pack law was created to tolerate your despicable tricks?" Selene's face drained of color, turning deathly pale. She gasped, her knees buckling as she collapsed onto the floor. She gritted her teeth to stop herself from crying out in sheer humiliation. Her scheme had been exposed in the most brutal way before the entire northern nobility. Kaelin did not bother to spare Selene another glance. He turned, taking long, firm strides toward Elara, who knelt in chains. The Lycan king bent down, grasping the iron chain locking her wrists. With a light tug, the thick chain snapped with a sharp crack, shattering into pieces that clattered onto the stone floor. Elara looked up at him, her ash-gray eyes flickering slightly. Kaelin said nothing. He removed his silver wolf fur royal cloak and draped it over her shoulders. The soft wolf fur enveloped her fragile body, dispelling the biting cold. The familiar scent of pine and early snow enveloped her, bringing a sense of absolute safety. Kaelin leaned down, gathering Elara against his broad chest. He lifted her up, letting her lean entirely against him before hundreds of horrified onlookers. He raised his head, sweeping his menacing red eyes across the great hall. The Lycan King's voice boomed like thunder. "Hear this clearly. From this moment on, Elara is under my supreme protection. Anyone who dares touch a single hair on her head is declaring war against the Lycan King. I will tear them apart and destroy their entire pack." His fierce declaration silenced all whispers. The High Council fell silent. Kaelin scooped Elara up in his arms, striding out of the chaotic hall. As they swept past Selene, Elara turned her head back to look. Selene was kneeling on the ground, her bloodshot eyes staring at her with pure resentment. Within her sleeve, a tiny wisp of black smoke began to slither once more, like a venomous snake waiting to strike. The real battle of life and death had only just begun. Chapter 9. The Pack Tribunal. A freezing winter blizzard howled fiercely outside the ancient stone Lycan fortress. Inside the vast great hall, the heavy air was frozen solid like ice. Dozens of torches mounted along the stone walls flickered weakly in the darkness. The dancing firelight cast shadows upon the solemn faces of the High Council. The 10 supreme elders of the council sat majestically on their stone seats. They held the authority of pack law to judge the accused sinner. Kaelin sat silently upon the grand stone throne in the absolute center. The face of Lycan King Kaelin was cold, as if carved from northern ice. His dark eyes grew increasingly dim, hiding a swirling inner storm. Beside his stone throne, Selene stood proudly in a luxurious white silk gown. She tried to look glamorous and poised, but her fingers were trembling slightly. In the dark corner of the hall, the royal twins were cowering in fear. The 2 children growled continuously, their crimson eyes filled with wild, beastly rage. The heavy clanking of metal chains echoed sharply from the entrance corridor. Every eye inside the great hall immediately turned toward the massive front doors. Elara walked into the courtroom, both of her hands bound with iron chains. Two formidable blackguard warriors marched on either side, escorting her forward. Yet her steady steps held not a single trace of fear. She held her head high, her gaze filled with absolute pride. The ancient healer power dormant within her body had now fully awakened. The seal containing her memories of the past 3 years had completely shattered. She remembered every single detail of what had been stolen from her. She remembered that cold winter night, and she remembered the pain of childbirth. She clearly recalled the unique scent and warmth of the Lycan king that night. Elara stopped her steps, standing directly before the Supreme High Council. The leading elder struck his heavy staff hard against the stone floor. The dry, sharp sound echoed throughout the vast space of the great hall. The elder looked down at Elara with the coldest, most contemptuous gaze. He officially declared the start of the Supreme Pack Tribunal. Selene immediately stepped forward, displaying a look of fake, dramatic pain. She turned toward the council, her voice cracking with forced tears. Selene loudly accused Elara of being a lowly, ambitious weakling. She accused Elara of using forbidden dark witchcraft to harm the royal twins. She presented a small glass vial containing a mysterious magical powder. She claimed she had found this evidence hidden right beneath Elara's mattress. This black powder, she asserted, was the dark magic used to poison the children. The Blackguard warriors also stepped forward to confirm they found the vial. The entire assembly of the council began to murmur in collective outrage. The elders looked at Elara with gazes full of deep disgust. They demanded that the strict pack law be enforced for her punishment. They wanted to strip away her wolf mark and banish her into the wild. Kalen remained sitting silently upon his grand, imposing stone throne. Yet his hands gripped the armrests so tightly that his veins bulged prominently. The Lycan King's dark eyes searched hers, demanding an explanation. He suddenly sensed a strange, inexplicable change emanating from her body. The distinct scent of magnolia flowers on her skin grew noticeably stronger. It was beginning to awaken his most deeply buried memories. Elara looked directly into Kalen's eyes, her gaze never wavering in the slightest. She took a deep breath and turned to face the solemn council. Her voice rang out clear, powerful, and resolute. She firmly asserted that she was completely innocent before them all. She declared that Selene was the true culprit who used evil witchcraft. Hearing this, Selene laughed out loud with sheer mocking sarcasm. She demanded to know by what right a weakling dared to slander her. Selene mocked her for being nothing but a lowly, powerless weakling. She challenged her to present any actual proof before the High Council. Elara did not flinch or back down before her malicious words. She took a bold step toward the glass enclosure protecting the twins. 2 Blackguard warriors immediately stepped in to block her path. But Kalen suddenly raised his hand, signaling them to stand down. The Lycan King's intense gaze locked onto her every movement. He wanted to see how she would prove the truth of her words. Elara stopped in front of the glass enclosure and looked at the 2 children. Seeing her approach, the twins immediately quieted their fierce, wild growling. Their animalistic instincts responded to the gentle tenderness radiating from her. Elara suddenly raised her iron-chained hand to her lips. She used her sharp fangs to bite down hard on her own palm. Her decisive, sudden action astonished everyone present in the room. Fresh, crimson blood seeped from the wound on her hand. Yet it was not the ordinary weak blood of a common weakling. The blood emitted a soft, warm, and gentle golden glow. It was the ancient healer blood that had now fully awakened. A rich, fragrant scent of magnolia flowers instantly filled the room. The pure, sweet fragrance completely dispelled the gloomy, icy cold. Elara pressed her bloody, glowing hand firmly against the children's collars. These collars had been personally put on them by Selene since they were small children. Selene had always claimed that the collars protected them from their beastly madness. Yet the very moment her healer blood touched the silver bands, a loud, sizzling sound erupted, accompanied by a thick plume of pitch-black smoke. The black smoke carried the foul, rotting stench of dark witchcraft. The silver collars shattered into 100 tiny shards upon the stone floor. Selene's malicious witchcraft spell was completely and utterly destroyed. The royal twins immediately stopped their wild growling. Their bloodshot, feral eyes returned to a calm, pure blue shade. They breathed a sigh of pure relief, softly calling out for their mother. Their choked, emotional voices echoed clearly throughout the vast courtroom. A brilliant, dazzling light suddenly flared up between the two of them. The ancient mate bond immediately activated. The crescent moon mark on her shoulder shone with a radiant brightness. The mate bond mark on his neck burned as hot as fire. The immense power of the bond shook the entire courtroom. The High Council elders shielded their eyes in sheer terror. Kalen felt a warm, powerful surge of energy rush through his mind. It instantly swept away the dark, foggy confusion caused by the magic. Shards of memories from that fateful winter night years ago became clear. He remembered the face of the beautiful girl who had saved him in the cave. He remembered the sweet magnolia scent that had lulled him to sleep. That girl was not Selene, it was Elara standing right before him. Kalen stood up abruptly from his grand stone throne, his eyes burning with the radiance of supreme authority. He looked down at Selene with the ultimate burning fury of a Lycan king who had been deceived for the past 3 years. Selene had now completely lost all traces of her usual haughty arrogance from her pale face. The breaking of her dark magic spell caused her to suffer a devastating and utterly brutal backlash. Terrifying black veins bulged visibly and clearly against her once pristine white skin. Selene gasped for air, her hands clawing desperately at her own throat in agonizing, excruciating physical torment. She collapsed heavily onto the cold stone floor of the great hall, her body convulsing in violent spasms. The deceiver's fake, beautiful mask was now completely stripped away in front of everyone in attendance. The High Council elders witnessed this shocking spectacle and stood up together in a wave of collective outrage. The leading elder loudly pronounced the sentence in an incredibly cold and solemn voice. He decreed that Selene was guilty of high treason for utilizing toxic, forbidden dark magic. Under the sacred pack law, she was stripped of all noble titles and had her wolf mark severed. Selene was sentenced to permanent, harsh exile in the freezing deadly northern forest. Blackguard warriors immediately stepped forward and dragged the weeping Selene out of the supreme courtroom. Her desperate, shrill screams were quickly drowned out by the howling winter blizzard raging outside. Kalen took firm, steady steps down from his grand stone throne, walking directly toward Elara. The brutal Lycan king, who had once been so merciless, now trembled before his true fated mate. He gently lifted her bleeding hand and pressed a tender, soft kiss upon it. The warm, soothing healer power residing within her blood instantly and completely healed the wound. Kalen pulled Elara tightly against his broad, solid chest, softly whispering a heartfelt apology. The royal twins were also released from their protective glass enclosure and came running out. They quickly ran over to wrap their arms tightly around their parents' legs, their bright laughter echoing. The family of 4 was finally happily reunited after so many years of painful separation. The purifying moonlight streamed down through the glass skylight, gently enveloping all 4 of them. Every doubt and lingering pain from their tragic past was now miraculously healed. Only the warmth of their true love and the unbreakable bond of their fated partnership remained. But just as everyone in the Great Hall believed that all their hardships had finally passed in peace, an earth-shattering howl from the deep, dark northern forest suddenly echoed back to the ancient fortress. The chilling howl carried a new, ominous dark portent that was about to descend upon the Lycan territory. Kalen frowned as he gazed out the window, drawing Elara and their 2 children even closer to his chest. The brutal king's battle to protect his family and mate had only just begun. Chapter 10. Healing Moonlight. The heavy doors of the Great Hall slammed shut, cutting off Selene's desperate screams. Due punishment was executed in accordance with the Supreme Pack law. The impostor was banished to the Deadlands. No one pitied the one who had used dark witchcraft to steal another's fate. Inside the Blackstone Fortress, silence descended like a solemn sanctuary. Hundreds of Lycan nobles, heavily armored blackguard warriors, and members of the Council of Elders remained prostrate on the freezing marble floor. They feared Kalen, but above all they felt deep shame for having once despised and trampled upon Elara, a weak Omega. Now the truth was laid bare. Elara was the brave woman who had saved the Lycan king all those years ago and birthed the royal twins. Kalen stood tall in the center of the Great Hall. The rolling alpha aura surrounding him gradually subsided, no longer carrying the bloodthirsty killing intent of the cruel curse. He turned to look at Elara. She was sitting on the stone floor, clutching the twins tightly to her chest. The children's amber eyes had completely lost their savage red glow. They buried their heads in the crook of her neck, whimpering softly. The warmth radiating from Elara's palms gently soothed the children's panicked minds. Looking at Elara's frail figure in her tattered maid outfit, bloodied from scrubbing the floors for months, his heart clenched in pain. His inner wolf whimpered in sheer guilt. He had allowed her to suffer injustice inside his own fortress, relegating her to the damp underground kitchen. An overwhelming wave of remorse washed over him, leaving the High King feeling suffocated. Kalen took a step forward. Each of his steps was slow but firm. He did not spare a single glance at the kneeling nobles. He stopped in front of her, his tall silhouette, casting a protective shadow to shield the mother and her children from the cold wind. Before the hundreds of eyes of the entire pack, the Supreme King slowly knelt down. He dropped to one knee on the freezing black stone, bowing his head before the woman who had been despised as a weak, useless Omega. Astonished whispers rippled through the crowd but were instantly silenced by Kalen's sharp glance. The Lycan king, who had never bowed to anyone, was now willingly kneeling at her feet. "Elara," Kalen whispered, his voice thick and raspy. He reached out with his large, battle-scared hands to gently clasp her slender, frail ones. "I am sorry, my love. I allowed darkness to blind me, forcing you to endure such excruciating suffering. This territory owes you a life, and I myself owe you my entire life." Elara looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. She could clearly feel the fated mate bond thrumming powerfully in her veins. Kalen, Elara called softly. "All the painful things are in the past, the magic seal has shattered, and we have finally found each other." Kalen gazed deep into her warm eyes, gently wiping away a tear. "Elara, you are my only true mate. Let me declare it to the entire pack." He helped Elara stand up beside him. The twins also hugged her legs, filled with pride. Kalen turned to face the great hall, his commanding voice echoing throughout. "Hear me, all of you. The woman standing before you is the sole High Luna of this fortress. Anyone who dares offend her shall face the severest punishment under pack law." The crowd of nobles bowed their heads to the ground in absolute submission. Kalen turned back, lifting Elara's chin and gently brushing aside a strand of magnolia hair to reveal her pale neck, where her old slave mark was fading. "It is time to seal our covenant, my Luna," Kalen whispered. "I am ready, Kalen," Elara replied. She willingly surrendered her trust to him. Kalen leaned down, carefully placing his sharp fangs against the crook of her neck. He bit down decisively yet, with immense reverence, gently pumping his pure alpha blood into her veins to complete the permanent claiming bite ritual. Elara whimpered softly, her hands clutching his sturdy shoulders. The pain of the bite vanished instantly, replaced by a surge of hot energy overflowing with love that erupted from deep within her soul. A blinding beam of silver light radiated outward, illuminating the entire great hall and dispersing the darkness accumulated over the years. The moment the mate bond was established, the stinging pain of the blood curse that had tormented Kalen for years suddenly vanished entirely. The dark veins bulging across his body subsided, his inner beast grew docile, resting peacefully beneath the Luna's moonlight. The blood curse was broken once and for all. The profound healing from Elara's healer blood flooded his mind. The claiming bite mark appeared sharp and clear, emitting a shimmering silver light before softening into a beautiful crescent moon scar. Their binding bond had become unbreakable. The purifying power of the mark rippled outward, sweeping through the entire fortress. Outside, the thick layers of snow began to melt under the moonlight. Green shoots sprouted from the barren cracks of the black stone walls. Thousands of rare medicinal herbs bloomed simultaneously. The fresh, sweet scent of magnolia drifted in, completely dispelling the stench of blood and death that had shrouded this place for decades. From this moment on, the Blackstone Fortress was reborn as a sanctuary of light. Thousands of Lycan citizens stepped out of their homes, gazing in bewilderment at the sight of medicinal herbs blooming in the dead of winter. Upon realizing that the king's curse had been lifted, they threw back their heads in unison, unleashing long, proud howls that tore through the freezing night. It was a howl of submission and ultimate joy, welcoming a new era. Kalen held Elara tight against his warm chest, listening to the howls of the pack. He bent down and scooped up both children in his arms. The twins giggled happily, their tiny hands playing with the pure white herb petals carried by the wind blowing through the large window. The children's eyes sparkled with pure delight, They were no longer in pain from the inherited curse. "Mother, the flowers are blooming so beautifully." The little girl cheered. The little boy clutched the edge of his father's wolf fur cloak, grinning widely. "We'll always be with Mother from now on, right, Father?" Kalen placed a tender kiss on the foreheads of his two children, then looked at Elara with eyes overflowing with boundless love. "Yes, my beloved children. From now on, no one will ever be able to tear our family apart. Your mother will stay here forever, keeping us warm." The joyful laughter of the twins echoed through the once dark stone corridors. In Kalen's warm embrace, watching her children laugh and play beneath the purifying moonlight, Elara felt that every wound on her body and soul had been completely healed. From a shunned Omega, trampled into the mud, she had fought her way through the storms to claim her love, her family, and her rightful place beside her king. The freezing winter had truly come to an end, yielding to a warm new spring knocking on the doors of the black stone fortress.